generally. They say there's only 5% of medical birth emergencies are actually genuine. The rest of them are created.
Hi and welcome to Lead Well.
Hello to this week's podcast episode for Lead Well. And again, I have a wonderful guest with me, and that is Sharon King. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Christine. So happy to be here.
Yeah, and it's great to have you from Thailand.
Yes, all the way from sunny Thailand.
So, let me share a few words about you before we start our conversation so that people know who you are. Well, they will probably not know who you are, but at least get a bit of an insight. So, Sharon, you are an international trainer of energy psychology techniques for transforming trauma and living a more joyful, connected, and empowered life. And one of your specialties is working with pre and perinatal birth trauma for both mother and baby. How interesting. And you're also a best-selling author. You have already written 2 books, is it?
Yes, yes, I've written one book and co-authored in a second book. Yes.
Okay, cool. And you're currently writing the third
My
one.
third book. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
That's great. And your specialty is transforming the experience of giving birth and also being born, which we all have, and any trauma associated with the conception and pregnancy and birth. And I bet you have seen a lot of trauma around that.
Hmm.
And you also work with mothers to achieve a natural birth.
Yes.
You're also helping women with overcoming infertility and IVF and adoption issues, and also healing the wounds of losing a baby, which we know by now is a huge trauma as well. So that's great. And of course, you have a lot of certifications and a lot of experience in holistic healing modalities. And you've also created your own, which is Heal Your Birth and the light matrix techniques, and we'll definitely talk about those. And you're living, as I already said, in Thailand, on a wonderful island in Thailand, and you're also hosting retreats there.
Yes.
So great reason to go there. And you're also producing online programs for parents to be and also for people who have experienced trauma, I guess, through giving
Yes.
birth and being born. That's wonderful. So, welcome again.
Thank you.
And of course, now I have a few questions for you, and I would love to hear the story behind the methods that you have come up with. So, what inspired you to create these 2 methods, the Heal Your Birth and the Light Matrix
Light
technique?
matrix.
What are they?
Okay. What? Yes. Okay. So it kind of all started when I was born.
Hmm.
So I had my own birth trauma,
Okay.
right? But I didn't realize that my own birth experience was playing into my mission on why I'm here, my life purpose, if you want to call it that. So if you forget about those early years for now, for this moment in time, when I was in 2007, in my 40s, early 40s, I discovered EFT, which is the tapping emotional freedom technique.
Hmm.
And I was completely blown away by the effects, the outcomes of the EFT. I thought it was a little bit crazy when I first heard about it. And it was actually part of James French's group when I was doing the animal communication with him. Somebody in that group said, "Does anybody know what EFT is?" And I'm like, "No, no idea." So go on Google. Up comes Gary Craig's website,
Hmm.
and he had written a manual about EFT. So I read through this manual, and it's just like all this tapping on your meridian points is just like, that's really crazy,
Mm.
says the person who speaks to animals through photographs.
Mm.
So that's too woo-woo for me.
Hmm.
So I parked it. But when I was doing my exams, certification, whatever you want to call it, you have to do readings for people's animals.
Hmm.
The people that were chosen, or I had unconsciously chosen, 2 out of the 4 of them actually did EFT with animals.
Ah, okay.
So I spoke to their animals, gave them a reading, conversation with their animals. And then I say to them afterwards, well, what's all this EFT business? And they said, well, it's really, really amazing to work with animals with EFT. And it's also pretty good with humans.
Mm.
I decided, right, that's it. This is the third time EFT's come into my face. The universe is trying to tell me something. So went on to Google again. And the first thing that came up on Google wasn't Gary Craig's website this time. It was Carl Dawson's website. And he was teaching in Findhorn in 2 weeks' time. So spoke to Carl, booked the flight, booked on the course, went there, was so blown away, as I say. And then just like we're going, yes, this is it. This is what I've been searching for all my life, because I'd done massage, reflexology, Reiki, aromatherapy, all the animal stuff, using herbs and aromatherapy oils with animals, bodywork, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I started working with humans with this EFT stuff. And then Carl started working with matrix reimprinting, which is basically the concept of inner child work mixed with EFT. So you work with your younger self and you tap on them at the time, whatever age you are when that trauma occurs. And you just imagine just tapping on them and helping them move through the trauma. So it was on one of these courses that I met a lady called Caroline, who was 5 months pregnant. And she had already given birth twice. Both births had been very traumatic. She'd given birth to 2 boys. Very traumatic, long labors. She had trouble breastfeeding afterwards. So, of course, she's now pregnant with number 3, and she's assuming that the birth is going to be like number 1 and number 2. So we started off doing the tapping for all of this fear about giving birth. And then we went into what we call the matrix, into the field. We went back in time and we started tapping on her younger self, who was in that position giving birth to her first son. When we went back to the memory, she was laying on the bed. She had the monitor around her belly, so monitoring the baby's heartbeat. She was hooked up to an IV drip because she was being induced. All right. So when she went back, her younger self was feeling trapped. The intuition is telling you your body needs to move, but you can't because you now got to keep still because you've got a baby monitor and you're hooked up to a machine. So we tapped on her younger self, helped her move through that feeling of being trapped, took the IV out, got her up moving around so she could listen to her body. It's quite a long story, so I'm just going to shorten it for you. The next point of trauma for her was the midwife was saying to her, look, you've been in labor for many, many hours. You're only 3 centimeters dilated. You're getting tired. I advise you have an epidural now. Right? You're getting very, very tired. Have an epidural, have an epidural. And she's going, no, 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 don't want an epidural. So, but in the end, she gave in. And it took 2 hours for the anaesthetist to come. So he eventually rocks up, gives her the epidural. The midwife then checks her again and goes, oh, no, you're 10 centimeters dilated. The baby's coming. You could have given birth naturally, but hey, now you get to do it pain-free. Right. In that moment, she lost complete trust of the birth professional. So why is this important? Fear stops labor. All right. In order to give birth, we need to feel safe, secure, and supported. Very much like when you're having intimate relationships with your partner, creating a baby. In order to really enjoy that, you need to be in a safe and trusting environment. So giving birth is exactly the same as when you created the baby in the first place.
And also when we look in the animal kingdom, of course, a mother would only give birth to her baby when she feels safe and when there is no danger around, no predator waiting for them.
Yeah. So nature's designed it that if a predator comes along, the labor stops.
Exactly.
The animal can get up, maybe grab any pups, kittens that it's had already and go run for her life. At least then she'll be able to give birth another day. Right? Or carry on birthing when she finds somewhere else safe. But as human beings, we don't realize, oh my God, we don't feel safe in this hospital or with this midwife or with this doctor. We just put up with it.
Mm.
So our body does naturally, it stops because we're now gone into fear and we don't feel safe. And then,
Mm.
of course, what do? We want to hurry up, make things happen. So how
Mm.
do we do that? We pump in drugs, we pull the baby out with forceps, we cut them open and pull them out. There is a lot of bad things that happen to us, like just getting here.
Wow.
So anyway, so we work on that part of the trauma.
Mhm.
And then we sacked the midwife. We sent the midwife away, and we brought in a new midwife, who just happened to be an angel called Annie.
Mm.
So Annie came in, and then like everything just started to happen. The baby started to be born, and she literally, she birthed her son in the matrix in her imagination and did the bonding process with him.
Mhm.
All right. So now we're asking her younger self, where do we need to go next? And we ended up back at her own birth experience when
Mhm.
she was being born. So then as she starts, and the good thing about this is when you're working with EFT, you're only working on your point of view. But when you're doing it with Matrix, or now my own version is called QFT, quantum field tapping.
Mhm.
So same principle as Matrix, where we work with our younger self. But what's interesting is like our younger selves talk back to us.
Mhm.
All right. So that, but also you can work with other people that are in that memory. So she obviously doesn't consciously remember her own birth experience, but when in her mind she steps back in, she realizes that her mother's feeling exactly the same fears that she was feeling.
Mhm.
So now we have to do tapping on mum, help mum move through, bring in support for mum. Baby Caroline then feels safe and comes into the world.
Mhm.
So we're about to do what we call the reimprinting process. Is like once you've completed a trauma, if you like, then and you've got to a good place, you then kind of take that energy, the changed energy, the changed picture through your body, through the cells of your body, and you send that back out to the field. So we were just about to do that process when she says to me, oh, I've got this like fear come up in my chest. And I'm looking at her going, well, that's not how it's supposed to happen. We're supposed to be at the positive end. But anyway, so I said, okay, let's explore this fear. And she says, well, I actually know what happened. She said, because mum told me she was born with yellow jaundice, had to stay in the hospital on her own at night while her mum went home to look after her brother.
Mm.
So we tapped on the baby for feeling abandoned by mum, for not understanding why mum wasn't there. And she explained to her baby self, look, mum loves you, but she just has to go home. You have to stay here because you're poorly, but you're going to be okay and you're going to get, mum will be here tomorrow.
Mm.
So when we asked the baby, well, what choices would she like? And in my mind, I'm thinking she just wants to go home with mum. But she said, no, 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 she wants to be with Angel Annie. If Angel Annie comes in and takes care of her, then she's going to be okay. So that was the picture that we re-imprinted. We then went to the birth of her second son. Very similar story to the first one, not much to clear there. The only thing that we had to clear was like he got stuck and the midwife had to turn him to get him out, but left him with a neck injury. That even at the age of, I think he was about 5 at the time we did the session, still had problems with his neck.
Mm.
So we did that, we cleared that, we went through the birth and bonding process, re-imprinted that. Now I'm being drawn to her belly. So she's 5 months pregnant. So I said to her, wouldn't it be fun if we just show the baby how the birth's going to be in the future? And she went, what a great idea. She said, on the way over here, then I was thinking about, where I want to give birth, who I want to be there. So she just recreated all of that in her
Mm.
mind. And literally, she put her hand on her belly. I instructed her to tell the baby, this isn't happening right now. This is a future event. Auntie Sharon is not a real midwife. But in another 4 months' time, this is how it's going to be. And she literally just showed the baby how the birth, the bonding, and the breastfeeding was going to go. All right. So the baby had already experienced through the mother's experience those other 3 births that
Mm.
we had healed. Plus, then we focus attention on the baby and we show the baby how the birth is going to be. After that session, didn't think much more of it. We both went on with our lives until I got an email from Carl to say, oh, by the way, Caroline's had her baby. She had a little boy. So I emailed back and went, great, how was the birth? He said, email me back, I'm a man, I didn't ask. Here's her email address. So I emailed her and I said, like, how was the birth? And she said, we need to talk. That's all she said. I was just
Mhm.
like, oh no, it all went wrong. Oh no, we have more work to do. Of course, because your mind automatically goes to the negative instead of the positive.
Sure.
So she comes on the phone and she says to me, well, I say to her, tell me about the birth. And she said, no, 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 wait a minute, wait a minute. Let me tell you what happened after the session. She said, when I got home, she said, my husband noticed how different I was because I
Mhm.
was no longer in fear.
Mhm.
All right. Now, her husband was a professional footballer, so he used to travel all over the world playing football. And she said that every time he would go away, she would incite an argument with him. And she never knew why.
Mhm.
She said, now, she said, when he's going to go away, she said, I don't need to have that argument with him because I realized that him leaving me was re-triggering me into when mum used to leave me in hospital when I was a baby.
Mhm.
So I no longer have to have that argument with him.
Mhm.
She said the other thing that happened is her second son, the pain in his neck went away. Third thing that happened was that family members, people that were close to the family, going, I don't know what it is, Caroline, but you guys seem to be even more connected,
Mhm.
So it really had an effect on the closeness of the family.
Mhm.
But the best thing was, she told me about the birth of baby Archie, and she said it was exactly how I showed Archie the birth was going to be.
Wow.
She said it was like there was only 2 points that you could say were pain. She said the rest of it was just amazing. She said it wasn't a quick birth. She said, but it was certainly, I needed no medical intervention. She said, we just worked together. She said, and when he came out, I had no problem bonding with him. I had no trouble breastfeeding him. And he's just the most beautiful, peaceful baby that you could wish to have.
Wow.
So in that moment was like, oh, now I'm excited. Now this is something that I would like to specialize in.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's how it all came about. That's
Wow.
the beginning. That's the birth of what was called the Matrix Birth Reimprinting at that time. And I've now renamed it Heal Your Birth.
Mhm.
Yeah, after my book, Heal Your Birth, Heal Your Life. So as you can see, like these very early life, and this is what I then started to learn about how our very early life builds the foundations of who we are.
Mhm.
Physically, emotionally, mentally, what we go through from conception in the womb and
Mhm.
birth creates our belief systems, how our body organizes itself. So, yeah, they're really, really important times in our life.
And it's also so great because we don't have to accept it as is. We can go back and work on it, even in retrospect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have so many client stories of how the relationship with their children changes or the relationship with their own mother changes if they do their own birth experience. My own experience with my mother, when I was born, my mum was told I was coming too quickly, so they pumped her full of pethidine.
Mm.
My mum went to sleep, so I then had to do the rest of the birth experience by myself and being drugged.
Mm.
And then when I was born, I was taken away from my mum for 5 or 6 hours while she recovered from the drugs that they gave her. So my baby self ended up in a nursery with other crying babies for 5 or 6 hours. And when I went to work with her, I could see she was trying to get out of her body, get out of the cot that she was in to go and help the other babies.
Mm.
And that's when I realized, so this is why I have a passion for helping people with their
Mm.
birth trauma.
Mm.
My baby self was setting me up for that
Mm. Mm.
through her own experience.
Wow. And I mean, at my age, I'm close to 60. It was the norm when we were born, we were taken away from our mothers
Yeah,
and put together with other babies during the night, for example. It's nothing
yeah,
like today where the baby is always with the mother, even in the hospital, and they leave the hospital much, much quicker. I know my father couldn't go and see me and visit my mother in the first 2 days. So
yeah,
completely different setup and wow, a lot of traumas, I guess.
absolutely. But birth today is still not how it should be,
Mm.
especially medicalized birth. If you've got a good midwife and you're confident enough to birth at home, then that is the best scenario, because once you step foot into that hospital, you lose all your rights, you lose all your power, and now you're on their time schedule and on their drug schedule as well.
On the other hand, I think the people working in the hospital, they're also going through trauma, because I bet it's not the way they would want to do it,
Yes,
but they have to because they're under such pressure as well.
exactly. The whole system needs a good overhaul.
Mm,
The way midwives are taught, the pressure that midwives have on them.
mm,
Because unfortunately, as with the story with Caroline, if you have a really good birth professional, then you're more likely to have a very good outcome
mm,
for your birth. If you
mm,
have somebody that's still old-fashioned of the belief that you've got to bully the mother into submission and wanting to go in too quickly with the drugs or the medical interventions, then as soon as all of that starts happening, then you're on a rocky road to not a good birth experience.
wow.
Generally, they say there's only 5% of medical birth emergencies that are actually genuine. The rest of them are created
Mm,
and
mm,
could be avoided if the birth professionals were trained in a different way.
wow. But the good thing is you can change something about your own birth, even in
Exactly.
hindsight.
Yes.
That's great. So when you're working with people, are you doing that mostly one-to-one? Because it's a very intimate work that you're doing, or are you also working with groups? How does that work?
So generally on a birth experience, I do it one-to-one
Mm,
because everybody's had such a diverse, different experience. But I do group work where we will do a meditation where you're connecting with your baby self in utero, for instance. I've just recently done a talk on your birth through the lens of color, because I was
mm,
also a color
mhm,
therapist as well.
mhm,
And I did a little meditation at the end of that.
mhm,
So anybody listening to this and would like to see that presentation and the meditation, then feel free to email me and I'll send you the link for that. But yeah, so I did a group meditation for everybody just connecting with their baby self. And it's quite safe to do that if it's just you and working with your baby self.
mm,
If you bring mother into the scenario, of course, some babies had a great time in utero because mum loved them and wanted them and they were planned. Whereas other babies like come in and they're not wanted, they're not planned,
mm,
and mother considers like all the options that are available to her. And the baby unfortunately takes that as a survival event.
mm.
And that's how early on the trauma can happen, really. So it's a little bit difficult when you're working in a group because of that dynamic. Some people can go back in the womb, have an amazing time. Other people go back and go, oh my God, it's not safe in here. And then, of course, if you've had a childhood of abuse from mum,
Mm,
then, so I tend not to do too much of that work in a group,
mm,
but what one-to-one is a lot safer and a lot better.
mm. And I guess it's primarily women that you're working with, or do you also have men?
No, I do have men clients. So of course they've had their own birth experience.
Mm,
Unfortunately, for a lot of little boys, they also go through, and this may be too much information for some people, but they also go through their circumcision.
mm,
So newborn babies, little boys, especially in America, or for religious reason, then they barbarically tie them down without any pain relief and they cut off the foreskin.
wow.
So that is one practice along with the medicalized birth that
Mm,
needs to stop, needs to change,
mm,
because men are highly traumatized by it. It's actually proven to do damage to the emotional brain.
mm,
And yeah, it creates a lot of rage, a lot of anger. It can be very much people with sex addictions, porn addictions, quite often because of their very early on sexual trauma. That's
wow.
what creates this. So
Mm.
anyway, not I'll go too much down that road.
Okay,
But
yeah.
but yes, but also fathers witnessing. So there's a story in my book where I work with a lady called Leanne, who was due any day to give birth to her second child. Her first birth experience was highly traumatic because she had to be induced, and then they gave her an epidural, and then she ended up with a C-section, but the epidural didn't work.
Mm,
So they had an emergency C-section where they cut her open when she was fully feeling everything.
wow.
So if you can imagine being a husband watching your wife go through that experience because he was in the operating room
Mhm.
and feeling totally powerless.
Mhm.
Because as a man, it's your job to protect your
Mhm.
wife. And he didn't know whether she was going to live or die, whether the baby was going to live or die. So he
Mhm.
was highly traumatized by being at his daughter's birth.
Wow. Wow. I'm getting
Yeah,
really emotional when I'm hearing that. So
yeah,
seems I have some work to do on that as well.
yes. So this
Wow.
is a good point where I then say to people, like everybody was doing the best they could with the
Mm.
knowledge and understanding they have at the time, including all the birth professionals.
Mm.
But it's a very big traumatic time.
Mm.
And if you've got any negative beliefs around like fear of authority, not feeling safe, my voice is not heard, anything around those areas, then when we're in that position of potentially a high trauma experience,
Mm.
then your negative beliefs like start screaming at you.
Mhm.
Right. So that contributes to, if you have a fear of authority and you've got a doctor telling you've got to do X, Y, and Z, but internally or your intuition is telling you something different, you're going to give in to that authority because you feel like you don't have a voice.
And you don't know better because you assume that they know what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Which is really fascinating because it's a trauma that almost everyone has gone through to some extent. And it's
Yeah.
all subconscious and it's all unconscious because we don't have a memory from that time, but the body has, and the mind
Yeah.
has, the brain
Yeah.
has.
But we do remember. So one of my clients taught me that if you speak to your child when they're just coming up to about 3, so this client messaged me and she said, it was my son's 3rd birthday the other day. And I asked him, do you remember your birth? And he said, yes, mummy, I do. He said, I kept trying to come out. He said, and I couldn't find my way out. And he's doing this with his head, right? He said, so I couldn't find my way out. So then I had to climb up a ladder towards the light, C-section, towards the light. He said, and then I was no longer breaking your back. Right? She said in that moment he said that, that was what she was screaming because he was back to back, right? So his spine was against her spine, one of the most painful ways of giving birth.
Mm-hmm.
And she just was screaming, I can't take it anymore. I feel like my back is breaking. But she never told him.
Wow.
But he told her, I
Wow.
got a ladder. I got myself out. I climbed up to the light. Then I was no longer breaking your back.
Uh-huh.
So she said she just burst into tears
Hmm.
because then he said to her, but mum, I didn't think that you loved me because you didn't hold me when I came out.
Wow.
Now, what had happened is they'd given her too much of the epidural. So instead of just being paralyzed from the waist down, she was paralyzed from the neck down.
Wow.
So she couldn't move her arms. She said, and she got to the point where she was panicking because she couldn't feel her breath.
Mm.
Right? Because she's totally numb.
Mm.
So she started to panic, thinking she was going to suffocate, die,
Yeah.
or her lungs were going to stop.
Yeah.
Right? This is like quite a dangerous situation she's in. So she said when he was born, they literally held him towards her, and all she could do was look at him because she couldn't move her arms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she said to him, oh, darling, mummy had too much pain relief, too
Mm.
many drugs. I couldn't hold you. She said, I held you with my eyes. She said, but I can hold you now,
Mm.
right? Had that not happened, had she not asked him that question, she'd have never have known. And that child would have grown up believing that his mother didn't love him because he wasn't held when he first came out.
Wow. You're the first interview guest that makes me cry on my podcast. Oh, wow. This is so emotional. Wow. Wow. So, what would be one thing that you would tell our listeners, our audience to do, to think about when thinking about birth?
Well, if you're somebody that's planning to get pregnant, the most important thing to remember is that You know, babies go through a transition, and a transition we went from, right? So transition from spirit connecting with the egg. So I believe that connection is made right at conception. So welcome your baby, right? At the next point of transition is when mum realizes she's pregnant. Now, some women are very intuitive and they know when they conceive. Other women have to wait until they get their pregnancy test and then they find out. So do the welcoming then. If you don't realize that, connect with your baby, talk to your baby, nurture yourself, do a lot of self-care, because your thoughts, feelings, and emotions go into creating that baby. Right, baby has no ability to separate from your thought, feeling, and emotion. So also realize that we, as babies in utero, also went through that experience. So a lot of what we carry within our body and our belief systems come from our parents, come from mum and from dad. So the more welcoming you can be, the more loving, more calm you can be, the healthier your baby's going to be. The work on your relationship with your partner, and also discuss things with your partner before you even get pregnant. Like if you're living in America, for instance, I see so many couples arguing over whether to circumcise or not to circumcise, you know, and like all of this stuff should be hashed out before you're even pregnant. Really, in my world. But if you're realizing that as I'm talking, you're thinking about this birth trauma that you may have had giving birth to your child or being born, then, you know, contact either me or somebody that's done the training with me and go through your birth or go through that experience and heal that trauma, not just for yourself, but it's for your children and also your children's children, your grandchildren, and the rest of. Every time we do a session to heal something, it affects the future generations.
Wow. And also everyone around me.
Of course. And then it goes into the collective. So the
Wow.
happier the child is, the more bonded and connected and safe the child feels, the more lovely human being that they're going to be, basically.
Wow. So it's something that everyone should be doing at some point.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Because we've all been born. And even if you had a really good birth experience, it could be that something happens while you're in utero, or it just could be that there may just be a few little tweaks that need to be done, or it may be that you're just feeling, no, I think my birth was fine, but what happened to me when I was a 2-year-old, or because then there's all the breastfeeding and the weaning and all the different stages that you go to, that again, this has an impact on your life. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. I mean, this is so emotional for me. I don't know why. I probably should work with you. I'm conscious of your time, so I could go on forever with you. But when people want to reach you, where can they find you?
Okay, my website's magicalnewbeginnings.com. There's a contact form there, or you can email me at sharon@magicalnewbeginnings.com.
Okay,
Yeah.
Magical New Beginnings. What a wonderful name. Cool. I'll definitely also link your website and your email into the show notes. And I can only say thank you from the bottom of my heart. It was really moving. And wow, I learned so much today. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
This was Lead Well. Now, what is the one thing that you're taking away from this episode? Please share in the comments below and do share the podcast with your friends and family, but only if you like it.